Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, trends, and issues from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening I'm joined by a local property rights activist and anti-Agenda 21 rock star in Rosa, Koire. And she's with the Post-Sustainability Institute, and we're glad to have her this evening. Rosa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in something as exciting as property rights activism.
Grew up a liberal Democrat, and my education, I went to UCLA, and I was a district branch chief for the California Department of Transportation, expert witness in land use and land valuation. I'm an appraiser, commercial appraiser. And I think it was around 2005, I was elected to a Citizens Oversight Committee for a huge redevelopment project in my town, Santa Rosa. And when I was serving on that committee, I found that, in fact, it was a fraudulent project. And in bringing the information, sort of innocently to the town, to the city, I found that, they were gunning for me immediately. And that was sort of my wake-up call to the reality of the loss of private property rights in our country. And when I was researching the political and corporate forces behind redevelopment, I found United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development.
So fraudulent projects? Mm-hmm. I can't believe such a thing would exist, and people trying to exert power over people who don't know what's going on?
Isn't that something?
Insanity. Insanity. And so Agenda 21 is something that some people have heard of, some haven't. Mm-hmm. Just by using those letters all in a row with those numbers behind them, people assume that we're going to have tin hats on for the rest of the show. Can you explain to them a little bit about what Agenda 21 is, or the primer for people who don't know?
Sure. Well, it's not like Area 51 or Catch 22. It's a real plan. It was signed on to in 1992 by the United States and 178 other countries. It is the United Nations plan. It's the action plan for sustainable development. It is the plan to inventory and control all land, water, minerals, plants, animals, construction, means of production, education, energy, information, and human beings in the world.
Well, see, people might think that that's completely crazy, and if they asked if you made it up and everything else, because it's for us crazy people to believe in, they wouldn't expect that you could actually find copies of it on the United Nations website, as an example, backed by the biodiversity study, which says things like agriculture and humans aren't sustainable. Mm-hmm. We've got to get rid of them.
What's sustainable? It is a real plan, of course, and it was signed on to by our country. And the thing that is really incredible is that it's not something that's way out there like in 1992. It's right now in the San Francisco Bay Area being implemented all over in every town. And of course, it's all over the country and all over the nation. And right here, we see it, of course, as one Bay Area, which is the regionalization plan here.
Right. And so people don't know what regionalization means. And many of them might not know that the 9 Bay Area counties are tied in together in what used to be an organization for best practices and sharing amongst those communities. Mm-hmm. But now these people actually have monetary distribution control and are setting forth a plan for changing the lifestyle for 9 million people in the Bay Area who have no idea what's about to hit them, right?
It's true. It's an arrogant plan that is the idea of regionalization. Of course, here in the United States, we have city, county, state, and federal. Right. And we elect all of those levels of government. Right. That's, the people have representative government. But regional government, regional governance is unelected boards and commissions that actually make the rules and direct what happens in your city, county, or state. So in this case, it's MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and ABAG, the Association for Bay Area Governments. Right. These are regional boards that are directing, they're going to be directing what's happening here in the Bay Area for 28 years and restricting our land use.
And if we think we're unique here in the Bay Area, we're misguided.
Oh, absolutely.
SCAG in Southern California is doing the same thing, Southern California Association of Governments or whatever, and it's in pockets around the country.
There are 500 metropolitan planning organizations in the United States.
Right.
So it's all over the U.S. and of course it's around the world. The goal really is the EU, the European Union. This is the ultimate, at least at this point, in regional governance.
Right, right. And what they propose this as is that citizens of their own volition, it seems, all got together and said they want the exact same things, right? High density housing, near mass transit. They don't want single family homes anymore. Everyone wants to move into the big city. Isn't that what you voted for?
You know, this is what makes people think you've got a tinfoil hat on when you start talking about this plan, because it's a crazy plan. It's not. We're not crazy. The plan itself is crazy, and they use these sort of visioning meetings. You know, are actually using a technique that was created by the Rand Corporation in the 1950s and 60s to sort of channelize political thought or people's opinion into a predetermined outcome while giving them the impression that it was all their idea. So aren't you smart? You created that plan all on your own, even though it's the identical plan all over the United States.
Yeah, coincidentally, they all want the exact same thing, which is very freedom limiting for some reason, because we don't need freedom anymore if the government provides everything.
It's outdated, the concept. And you know, what's unsustainable? Private vehicles, private single-family homes, meat eating, that goes over real big in Texas, I'll tell you. Tillage, livestock, air conditioning, appliances. These are considered to be unsustainable according to this plan.
Right. And so how did you get involved in actually not just being ticked off, but your face shows up all over YouTube and various places. You've written a book about that, and you can tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, let me show you the book. Okay, let's see. This is it. It's Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. And it's a real short book, and it's about the implementation of Agenda 21 locally, because it's a global plan, but it's implemented locally. And I started giving speeches about Agenda 21, and now I'm going around the world and giving these speeches. And people are eager to get this information, and to understand that this is not a conservative or point of view. I happen to be a liberal Democrat, but
well, they're going to throw you out for doing this. It's not.
Oh yeah, no, they hate me. But I'm going around speaking to Tea parties, libertarian groups, Republican groups all over the country, and of course I have spoken at some universities, and it's difficult to hear this when you're progressive, because it sort of contradicts your entire worldview. Because the educational system has indoctrinated children all the way up through to postgraduate school in sustainable development principles.
And unfortunately, you talk about the indoctrination. I recently had an opportunity to speak to some master's students in urban planning at UC Berkeley. And I think
that was fun.
Well, they had no idea that people had an opposing view. And they come at it from the perspective they are trying to help the planet, and they believe, because this is what they've been told all throughout life, that this is really good for society, and everybody really wants this. And so when you contradict them, especially on concepts like the inability for government to truly make people equal, I think I mentally scarred some of them for life. They'll never be the same. But it's important that they see these other views. And curiously, I'm wondering what your experience has been outside the country. How much more or less aware are people of Agenda 21 outside the United States?
That's an interesting question, Chris, because I was interviewed on Red Ice Radio, which is in Scandinavia. And they kind of thought that ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, and Agenda 21 were United States issues. And that was very interesting, because, of course, it is global. It's all over in every country. And most every country has a local Agenda 21 guideline and program. So that I think what's happening now, though, is that awareness is really coming to the fore, because awareness is the first step in the resistance.
Sure. And even people are shocked to know, even some of the electeds who are not elected to this regional governance committee, but who have been assigned to it, it's interesting that many of the players, like, for example, they're going through public input sessions right now, and it's a whole new set of representatives that are coming through, many of which have no idea of what the plan is about, where it originated, that it's been going since the 90s, that the ABAG website actually has documentation about them signing on to this 15 years ago. And so they have no idea what's going on, and they weren't involved in the initial public input sessions, which literally had 2,000 mostly angry citizens from across the political spectrum saying, this is not what we want. We don't feel like we're heard. You're ignoring the citizens.
Yeah.
But these guys all have fresh smiles on because they don't know any better.
Well, I think they do know better. But the deal is that, of course, these plans are set up to use the Delphi technique to, to actually channel and propagandize the public into the outcome that is desired by this plan. So people who are serving, our local officials are being, propagandized by their own staff. And the staff, of course, is being propagandized by the American Planning Association, which put out a 12-week-long boot camp about how to handle people like me and you who are telling the truth about these plans.
Yes.
So when you get that kind of, that's so great to catch them and things like that. I actually became a member of the American Planning Association so that I could get that information.
I was at their national conference 2 weeks ago on behalf of a client.
Okay.
But I was there for 4 days of fun in the belly. And
it's upsetting, really, to be right up close and looking down into that cauldron, because this is really an indoctrination plan, and it is really about taking away your individual freedom, your right to have and own and use your private property. And our nation is founded on private property ownership, and we are losing our freedom.
And so you've talked about the fact that some of these electeds are being propagandized and everything else. We've just, as of this week, finished the public input sessions, and many people feel like they were ignored during the session. Some of us went to directly poke the observers in the eye and let them know what we really thought about the plan, and use actual documentation that they've put out to explain why this is a horrible idea. But we've got 9 million people whose lives are about to be affected. Probably less than 1,000 came out because they didn't know what was going on. What now?
What now?
How can we continue to fight this? What are the next steps as you see them?
Well, we have just finished up the public hearing process for One Bay Area. And so the next thing now is that we are going to sue. We are suing to stop One Bay Area, Plan Bay Area. And by we, I mean the Post-Sustainability Institute and Freedom Advocates, and we are raising funds right now to sue to stop this. And we are fundraising all over the United States because the plan that we have here in the San Francisco Bay Area is literally the worst plan I have seen all across the nation, and these plans are everywhere. But this one in particular is the worst because it actually restricts development to a very, very small part of the Bay Area, very, very tiny areas within urbanized areas, and literally 80% of residential development and 66% of commercial development has to be in these areas for the next 28 years. The only way to stop this now is with a lawsuit, and that is why we are out there trying to, trying to get people on board to assist in working on that.
And these things are called priority development areas, right? And so for people who don't know that their land is inside a priority development area, they may lose the privilege to use their property in the ways that they want to. For example, if they're not building mixed-use housing or are out of compliance with these other directives, then they're not going to be able to use their property in the way they'd like to. And if people are outside the area, then they're not going to be able to use their property either.
If you're in the county, if you're in an unincorporated town in the county, or if you're just out in the county, literally this plan says that 100% of development has to be within the urbanized areas. So they're effectively basically taking conservation easements over the entire county areas in the San Francisco Bay without paying for them. And literally you will not be able to build in the county areas.
And so talk to me a little bit about the basis for your lawsuit. I know many people have tried to figure out, we need to sue these sons of people who are are not happy beings. But the other thing is they haven't been able to figure out how to go about it. I mean, I've talked to people who are interested in doing it because maybe there wasn't proper public notice. Maybe there's some other flaw. Maybe going after the deception that they used within the Delphi techniques that they used, for example, and people don't necessarily understand what that means, that they had paid stakeholders in the room or people who were going to benefit that were voting on the plan for the outcome that they wanted. And they would show up in multiple places as if they were concerned citizens. Yeah. Which is completely deceptive. And they were steering people.
Yeah, that's standard operating procedure all across the nation. This is, Agenda 21 is about empowering non-governmental organizations and regional boards so that, and these are not elected by us, so that's kind of how they get around it. The way to fight, what the plan is really, is the violation of the California Constitution and the United States Constitution, the 5th and 14th Amendments. It violates urban growth boundaries, which were voted on by the voters. Aside from, maybe technical issues that you might find, these are specific issues that we will be using as our grounds for our lawsuit.
So talk to us a little bit more in detail about what that means. How are these federal and state level constitutions being violated in your estimation?
Well, you'll see the 5th Amendment of the United States Constitution violated because they'll be taking your rights without paying you for them. That's a violation of just compensation. The 14th Amendment is equal protection under the law, and that's being violated because if you're not in a priority development area, the people in priority development areas, property owners, will be getting property permits to develop 80 times more than those who are outside. So that's a huge, huge unfair and unequal application of the law.
Right.
And then, of course, we have pages and pages of objections that we're writing now to this plan so that we can make sure that we cover everything and exhaust our administrative remedies when we get to court, before we get to court.
Great. And so on the state level, what are we looking at as far as violations?
The state Constitution is great because it actually says, the United States Constitution says that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The California Constitution says that you have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and the enjoyment of your property, enjoyment and use of your property. And so that is written right into our Constitution. And this plan violates clearly the opportunity that you have to use your property. And this is regardless of whether it's fully developed. If you want to, knock out a wall and add on something, this plan is literally going to restrict you from doing that.
Right.
So and we're talking about a 28-year long plan.
Right. Which they say, of course, is going to be evaluated every 4 years. So
it's
really,
a living document.
Don't worry, it's a living document.
That's
don't worry
scary.
about it.
Hey, I don't know about you, but living documents are pretty scary because when you think you've got something nailed down, imagine trying, when you've got a business and you don't have a 4-year plan, you've got a 20-year plan. And here you go with this thing that you don't know where you are when you go for a loan on your property.
And that's the thing, right? Let's say your loan was a living document and every year they decided to reevaluate how much you're going to be charged. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Well, if it's kind of done, the way that I think about it is if you're looking at something that doesn't make any sense, it's probably Agenda 21.
Well, yeah. I recently presented some logic questions for people to assess, and I mocked Agenda 21 in those, and they said, well, what is this, Agenda 21 or Common Core, these logic questions? I said, no, it's neither of them. I mean, obviously, there is no logic involved in either Agenda 21 or in Common Core types of curriculum because we're just being pushed down, like you said, a progressive path where people just really have no clue.
Common Core is Agenda 21 because globalization is the standardization of all systems, and Common Core is standardization of education.
Yes. We all have to be equal in the collective.
Yeah, that's right. I said I was a liberal Democrat, but I am not a progressive.
Well, and that's it's a nice distinction to make, and a lot of times people don't know the history because the terms are used sometimes interchangeably. And so the question is, are you somebody who's completely against mass transit and high-density housing and green spaces?
Well, I'm like everybody. I've got a bike. I like to ride it. I think mass transit is great. If you want to build a high-density building with ground floor retail and apartments on top of it, great, but don't use my tax dollars to do it.
Right.
And this is the difference, is that your property tax and your transportation tax dollars will be used to subsidize property types, smart growth, for which there is no demand.
Right.
And they actually literally restrict development all around that everywhere else, so that pretty much if you want to build anything, you're going to build what you're told to build by MTC and ABAG, and by extension, Agenda 21.
Right. And there's no basis in reality whatsoever.
Well, there's no demand. If there were, then they wouldn't need subsidies.
Well, and they're looking at trying to justify, in some cases, transportation investments as an example that they've already made that make no sense based on the density of the Bay Area to have implemented in the first place.
You know, that is the philosophy behind this, is that if you don't have enough people using public transportation, let's pack them all into, you know, these areas right near the stations.
Yes.
And, you know, the train stations, and then we'll have people using transit. But this is, you know, this is also part of controlling, inventorying, and monitoring, surveilling all the populations, and this is the plan.
And so tell us how people can find out more about supporting the lawsuit, or how to find out more information about your book.
Great.
Or you.
Well, or me. Well, of course, there are a lot of videos of me on YouTube and speaking about these issues, and as well, you can find my book, Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, on Amazon, on our websites, Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com, and also postsustainabilityinstitute.org.
Well, Rosa, we appreciate you joining us this evening. We look forward to following what you're doing and also being right by your side, poking people in the eye. So
Great.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And at this point, if you hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
Say, well, I say I'm a constitutional law attorney. And they say, oh, really? What kind of constitutional law attorney? I say, well, I'm the true kind. The kind that believe that the Constitution is what the Constitution says and what it was intended to say. Anything beyond that is tyranny and should not be allowed.
So it's come to this, my friends. You ready for the second American Revolution against a ruling class that simply lectures but does not listen or defend the American people? It is government versus the people. Am I right? Yes. Look at the Electoral College example. Right? A leftist popular challenge to states' rights. You think the founders weren't brilliant people? Did they not know what they were doing by carefully calibrating to get the small states and the big states to come together? Why does Wyoming get 2 senators in California? Actually, I'd rather have Wyoming's 2 senators.
And welcome back to the right side. That was a message from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum, who we appreciate tremendously for helping to make sure that the show can be brought to you. But the thing that they're best known for is their speaker series. And so just to share a few of the speakers that are in the coming lineup this evening, Bill Whittle will be speaking at the Conservative Forum, and that's held at 432 Stearland Road, just 3 minutes from here in Mountain View at the IFES Portuguese Hall. Typically, it starts at 7 o'clock and doors open slightly before then. But in June, on the 4th, Ying Ma, author of The Chinese Girl in the Ghetto, will be a guest on July 9th, which is the second Tuesday as opposed to the normal first Tuesday of the month. Debbie Bacigalupi, who's a recent candidate for Congress and a recent guest on the show, will be there. On August 6th, Steve Forbes and Elizabeth Arms will be talking about their new book, The Freedom Manifesto, and yes, it is that Steve Forbes. On September 3rd, Elizabeth Nixon will be talking about her book, Ecofascism. But in closing tonight, I wanted to share a little bit of the logic that I hinted at during the show that doesn't exist within the One Bay Area plan. I posed a few questions for some of my Facebook friends, and the first one was One Bay Area logic question of the day number 1. If high-density housing is more affordable, why isn't rent $300 a month in San Francisco or in Manhattan, as an example? One Bay Area logic question number 2. Let's say, hypothetically, 400 people live in human kennels. Those are 200 square foot apartments, for those of you who don't know. And they're living over a retail space that's designed to provide them with walkable jobs where they live. If the sign in the window says Starbucks, part-time jobs are created for 20 of those kennel dwellers, and the local tattoo artist and body piercing engineer picks up about 10 extra hours of work per week. How many walkable jobs are created if the sign in the window says for lease? Logic question number 3. If John used to kiss his family goodbye in the morning and use his car to commute 20 minutes each way to work, and now, out of fairness to the collective and to comply with the One Bay Area goal for him to walk 70% more per day for transportation and use mass transit, he's changed the way he commutes. His commute's now 60 minutes unless there are delays. How much extra time has One Bay Area allowed him to spend with his family and thereby improving his quality of life? Now, the reality is, I'm not against public transportation, apartment dwellers, I've been one, tattoos or body piercings, because I've had 1 tattoo, 4 earrings, and a body piercing I did at home myself. I'm not against these things, but what I am against is a central planning organization dictating to me and 9 million other people their version of utopia, and these people have no idea what's about to hit them. So what I'm suggesting is that you learn more about the One Bay Area plan, and then join me, Rosa, Koire, and other countless activists in this fight for your liberty and to protect the Bay Area we all call home and love. I've been your host, Chris Pareja, and this has been The Right Side. We'll see you again soon.